Great, Fiona. Thank you very much. Next up, Monica Lennon, to be followed by Mark Ruskell, please.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, everyone. And I agree with our Deputy Convener. The work you're doing is fantastic, and we hope to have ongoing engagement and dialogue with you. And your challenge to us as parliamentarians and to the government is so important. I really agree with the points made about the contribution that the children have made. They are fantastic, and I've been out and about locally speaking to schools, and I think children really get that this is about climate justice, but also about social justice. So I was really interested by the comments.
Before I play any more of this garbage from the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee from a week or so ago, you know, it's kind of similar to what I was talking about in relation to the video uploaded earlier on today pertaining to feminism. How children seem to have these solutions in mind to achieve gender equality that are all identical to feminist talking points. How would children in school settings, first and foremost, come to the conclusion that climate change, in and of itself, is about climate justice and social justice? On top of that, where these concepts at some point must have been introduced to them now. So it's bad enough that they're teaching children from very young ages all about climate change, and they've got the perfect cop-out, the perfect excuse to continue to do so, because in the eyes of, you know, the gullible or the average Joe, or even the people that buy into this notion that there's a climate crisis, or a man-made climate crisis anyway, it just appears as if we're educating children because they're going to bear the brunt of it in the future. You know, it's their future too. But the reality of the matter is, it just appears, well, from where I'm sat anyway, that you're just introducing every single thing, because it's not just climate change, is it? As I've alluded to in previous videos, including my previous one, feminism or gender equality, LGBT, anti-racism, etc. It's every single progressive subject has been introduced to children at very young ages, learning for sustainability, etc. So climate change is really no different in that respect. You're just introducing these things to children at very young ages in order to have a generation in the future that are ripe and ready. Brainwashing, grooming, but they call it emboldening, and empowerment. Yeah, but still, she says that with a straight face. That children, they really get it. They really get that climate change is about climate justice and social justice. Was that page 3 of their textbook that taught them that? Page 4, page 5? I wonder which page it was, because I'll tell you one thing, they didn't come to those conclusions themselves.
I think from Ellie and Lewis about food a few moments ago, and from speaking to young people when I do school visits, they're very active collecting food donations for local food banks and charities. They're very aware of poverty and of food poverty, but they're also very aware of the amount of food that is wasted, even within their own schools, and they feel very frustrated by that. So I just wonder how the Assembly feels that we can better address that. I know other parts of the world have legislation that effectively tries to ban food waste and has quite serious measures. Is there more that you think we can do in Scotland to really reduce food waste?
I'll let Ellie start off, and then I'll pass to Lewis.
Thank you for the question, Monica. Yeah, I think food and it's our personal choices. There's so much that informs our choice of our personal diet, and I think the food system that we're currently in is a broken one, and I think we need to rethink the whole way of how we feed ourselves as a nation. There's excess eating, which leads to obesity and ill health, and it's a burden on the NHS. The types of food that we're eating are not good for the climate, they're not good for ourselves, and there's evidence to say that if we eat for a healthier climate, we're going to be eating for a healthier nation as well. So I think there's a whole kind of shift in the way that Scotland needs to perceive its own diet. And I think, again, we go back to knowledge and education, which is so important for people to make informed choice. And that needs to be accessible to all. And one of the recommendations that we keep stressing, that we're disappointed with the response that we gained from the Scottish Government, is recommendation number 39, which is public education campaign about sustainable diets. And this is something that the Children's Assembly also felt really strongly about. And if you don't have the information, you can't make the right choices. And if there's a public campaign around sustainable diets, I think that would include food waste. It would include eating the right amounts of food in the right way, and it would have huge influence. And I think the government has a lot of leverage to change the psyche, because it is a culture change. And I've already mentioned recommendation number 26, which again, we were really disappointed that this wasn't uptaken by in the response that we received. And there's huge power in public procurement that British government have control over, and that if you changed public canteens to be sustainable diets, you're giving out a clear message, you're setting precedent, and you're setting a prototype demonstrating how we can eat healthily as a nation. And for some people, it would only be one meal a day. It wouldn't even be that. But if it's a clear message coming from the top down, people are going to listen to that. And if it's accompanied by this education campaign as well, I just see this being, the Assembly's felt strongly that this is a quick win that is kind of easy to adopt. But yeah, disappointed that we haven't had that take of that one.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Maybe to pass on to Lewis, who I know wanted to also talk about this.
So that woman from the Scottish Climate Assembly there made reference to recommendation 39, which is sustainable diet public information campaigns. Funnily enough, the Children's Parliament, which also made recommendations alongside the Climate Assembly, alluded to a similar type of recommendation. So a bunch of children from across Scotland just magically managed to conjure up the exact same sort of policy that supposedly 100 people across Scotland, adults, who have no political bias, no climate activism, etc., etc. They're just normal people. They all came up with the same conclusion. Right, okay. Nonetheless, there's this constant talk throughout all these types of committees. The ones in particular, obviously, that I'm referring to in this instance is Net Zero Energy and Transport Committees. But they're not the only ones. There's another climate one, if I'm not mistaken, that comes around once a week in the Parliament. But there's always talk of culture change. Behavioural change as well. That's a good one, and references to education as well. The way that woman was speaking there, she said that we need education in order for people to make better informed choices. Without the education, they don't make the right decisions. So again, so in other words, they need to be presented with a quote unquote education that suits the narrative, suits the agenda, as opposed to a neutral education for people to make informed decisions. I fucking hate it. So in reality, what they want is to educate people to come round to their way of thinking and then adopt policies that they want them to adopt, one way or the other. That's why they always want the government to intervene, or when it's the actual government themselves talking in their committees, or the members of the Parliament talking in their committees, they always refer to things that they intend to do to change our behaviour. It's social engineering. But nonetheless, I'm digressing from that. So it says here, education will help to ensure the population understands the benefits of what might be possible and play their part to help achieve our climate goals. The benefits, and then this bit down here though. Sustainable diet public information campaigns. Initiate public information campaigns, including education for children and families, that deliver accessible advice and information on transitioning to a sustainable diet. Now, what is a sustainable diet? Now, she was talking a little bit about, or she was asked anyway initially, about food wastage. But she quickly went on to talking about, there's evidence to suggest that if we eat better for the planet, you will eat better for your nation. Just how convenient. Such hippy-dippy talk from the useful idiot speaking on behalf of the United Nations. But it says it here as well. This is important because not everyone is aware that specific foods have an impact on our climate. Our society has a cultural bias towards choosing meat, and most of us don't truly appreciate the impact of dairy and meat consumption around the world. This is what it's about. They want you to stop eating meats. But the peasants will stop eating meat. Bill Gates and whatnot will still be chowing down on the finest cuisine of Highland cattle, etc. But you will be resorted to green beans and maybe a couple of crickets here and there. All joking aside, that's what this amounts to. In some capacity, it's about getting you to stop consuming meat. And they insist that this is to save the planet. Everything's about saving the planet these days. Everything's about saving the climate from an impending doom. Right, yeah. It's total fucking nonsense, but so they want to educate the public, or more in particular, children. They can get away with educating the children. All there is to know about the benefits of a plant-based diet. They don't talk about the negatives, of course. Fuck the negatives, they're irrelevant. They play second fiddle to a burning planet. Growing awareness will be key, with effective information helping the majority of the population to make the transition from high-carbon foods to more sustainable diets that are plant-based and grown in ways that minimise carbon emissions. Yeah, okay. But the point here is, it's just there's constant references to education, hand-picked information and education, quote-unquote, or cultural change, interventions from government, behavioural change. Everything is about changing how you operate your life. Micromanagement is coming our way, slowly but surely. They can't implement it all at once. It's coming in though. Bit by bit, you're starting to see the bigger agenda opening up as they talk more and more and more about the need to change your behaviour, change the way you view the world, etc. And let's just play this out, hypothesize for a second that nobody plays along with this shit. Inevitably, government intervention would have to come into effect, would it not? So what they're doing at present is trying to get you to change your behaviours and change your lifestyle, etc. of your own accord. But at some point in the future, it will lead to government intervention, one way or the other. Micromanagement, as I said.
Also working to update and strengthen our Learning for Sustainability Action Plan to take full account of the recommendations from the Assembly and the calls to action from the children.
Oh, fucking hell. Yeah, as you can see, I'm just kind of flicking through several different climate-related episodes from the Rainbow Unicorn Parliament, shall we say, instead of making individual videos or whatever. And I'm not making some sort of comedic compilation of that. It's just if I hear anything relevant, I'm just going to include it at towards the end of this video. But I had to include that. Learning for sustainability and recommendations from children. And where the hell do the children obtain the knowledge in order to put forth recommendations? Yeah, problem, reaction, fucking solution. I
really want to highlight the role of our young people in the climate crisis, who were not wholly satisfied with the outcomes of COP26. Young people have been truly inspirational, shown absolute determination and passion, and are arguably the most environmentally focused part of our society. If we fail them, it is young people that will bear the brunt of our inaction and incompetence. It is our generation's duty to ensure that our children have a planet to inherit. Just a few weeks ago, the NZ committee heard from members of the Scottish Youth Parliament and the Children's Parliament, and it was so refreshing to speak to them and hear some of the things that they wanted to focus on, such as promoting active travel, sustainable green transport and a circular economy.
And I wonder where they got these concepts from. Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. Again, no, they're always referencing the young, because that's one area where education, brainwashing, grooming, whatever you will, whatever word you wish to choose. It's one area where that seems to have worked a treat, with climate-based education being rampant, clearly, from as young as primary one in some schools. Teach them all there is to know about everything climate-related. Watch them go out and protest, encourage and endorse those protests. And the rest is history. But it's remarkable how they all sit there, straight-faced, bold as you like, talking about children and young people in general, taking and praising them for how climate-focused they are, completely negating the fact that the reason that they are the way they are is because of hours and hours and hours of lacking education that's completely focused around that issue, as opposed to the rest of the populace that doesn't have to suffer that on a daily basis in a school setting. There's a reason that children are very easily manipulated. It's because at that age, They're ripe for the picking, as the LGBT Youth Scotland activist said a few years prior in a video that I've made and in streams that I've been a part of. We've played the video several times now, where he says children's minds are like sponges. So, you know, they soak up everything. AKA, it's great to just pollute their little minds with progressive talking points. So naturally, if you tell the little children that there's a burning planet unless we implement X, Y, and Z, they're going to start to parrot your talking points. That's nothing to be proud of in terms of appraisal, but that's here nor there.
Just about listening to young people. They absolutely must be included and be a key part of the decision-making process. Our approach to climate change will require cooperation at all levels, and at the moment I feel our young people are drastically underrepresented within a community setting, local government and national government. We need to ensure that we are welcoming and encouraging our young people to enable them to get involved. I'm therefore delighted that the £500,000 for the social enterprise fuel change will accelerate the programme's expansion, enabling more young people to contribute to developing low-carbon solutions to climate-related challenges. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, there are many challenges ahead, some of which my colleagues have highlighted today, and the work of the NZ Committee will be absolutely crucial in helping to work through these. The Scottish Government is taking action, and given some of the policies that I've outlined today, are clearly committed to meeting the targets set. But given the reserved nature of many key policy levers for decarbonisation, a more ambitious UK-wide approach will be absolutely critical in achieving our goals. While the Net Zero strategy reaffirms UK Government priorities, it does not go far enough in many of the areas where we have repeatedly called for action. The world's leading nations cannot procrastinate any longer. COP26 was not job done. It did not deliver as much as Global South countries, activists and campaigners rightly demanded. COP27 must see the world deliver on commitments made with urgency and energy and ensure that the promises made are met and that climate action delivers for those on the front line of the crisis.
Fuck off, man. You know, they're saying the same thing about COP27 as they were about COP26. I remember it well. All the rhetoric relating to, this is it. John Kerry, if I'm not mistaken, said this is it. This is our last chance. Now they're all saying COP26 didn't really work that well, so it has to be COP27. You know? And I remember COP25, I think it was. The only thing that they managed to agree upon at COP25 was to meet again the next year at COP26. An event that had already been pre-scheduled because, as we all know, COP happens every year anyway. So essentially what had happened there was a bunch of overpaid pricks from all over the world came together to talk about nothing and pretend that there's a climate crisis. And the only thing that they could agree amongst themselves was to meet a year later. Something that was already agreed in principle. Fantastic work. But second of all, though, they love to do this. They love to talk about, but the impending doom, it's imminent, etc., etc. They all say it straight-faced. No concern. Why do we need to wait till COP27 to talk about things that could be done on a Zoom call? It's just a bunch of virtue-signaling bullshit. The reality of the matter is, they used COVID to halt the economy, and then are using climate change as an excuse to transform it. That's the reality of the matter. That is what is happening here. It's fucking nonsense about carbon being the sole contributor to a warming planet. Just ignoring that big yellow object in the sky for one. Ignoring the fact that throughout history, since the planet's inception, there's been periods of extreme warmth, periods of extreme cold, ice ages. Ring any bells, eh? Medieval warm period is the one I always refer to. They just completely wiped that from history. They just don't talk about it anymore. The planet fluctuates in terms of its temperature. They're just pinning the blame on carbon now, that pesky carbon, as an excuse to transform society at the behest of their puppet masters at the United Nations and co.
Natalie Dawn was quite right to emphasise that those who suffer most from climate change are the ones who have done the least to cause it. She is also absolutely right to highlight that young people have been leading the way on these matters, and I'd like to take this moment to thank all of the climate strikers, the Stop Cambo protesters, and all the young people who have powerfully made their voices heard. Keep it up. The world needs you. Thank you. Tess White will be interested in a study that came out today that shows that insulation and heat pumps can deliver UK energy security more quickly than domestic gas fields, and I encourage her to read that study.
Recommendations, I feel like they need to be updated again because the urgency has needed to be picked up. But one of the questions that I've asked a lot of the ministers during this process of talking about our recommendations is what are the main barriers that hold government back from acting with the urgency that we think is necessary, we know is necessary. And speaking to Patrick Harvey and Humza Yousaf in particular, they learned about the barriers of public uptake and public will. And I think what we kind of can show and be useful moving forward as a citizens' assembly is, as ordinary citizens, being exposed to the facts and the evidence and the reality of the situation, that our leaders do not need to worry about public will and uptake from informed citizens. And this is why the education aspect and the public information is so important, because with information, people can make the informed decisions, and we don't need to worry about that as a barrier. And I hope that moving forward as a citizens' assembly, we can facilitate and help government to be that voice of confidence, to speak on behalf of the collective, of the citizens of Scotland, so that we can reassure that we are ready, we would be ready. And if the majority of people did have this knowledge, then they would be ready as well to move forward.
Thank you. Again, I will have to have a bit of a caveat up front that I haven't examined the Scottish target and the attempts to get it specifically. I think you highlighted a couple of very interesting points in your question that I would pick up there. And similarly to Mick, I used the word sustainable. That is one of our priorities as the transition team, sustainability. And we read that as both financial and environmental when we're going into these questions. So I think one of the first things I would say is the best thing we can do, and others have alluded to this in the near term, is to get people back on the railway. So that is the one of the greenest measures we can take at the moment, is to make the railway a more attractive mode of transport and stop people using cars.
I do agree that the rollout of electric vehicle infrastructure has a role to play in this. Now, on the 26th of January, we announced a new draft vision for that public charging network, along with plans for a £60 million fund that will double the size of the public network over the next few years by leveraging commercial investment. And measures to make public transport more efficient and affordable have also been a priority. And I know Mr Simpson made mention of this in his opening remarks. Additionally, that's highlighted in our route map to reduce car use, which was published last month. That includes, though, through the provision of free bus travel under the under-22s and our fair fares review, which I think is hugely important in that regard, which will consider options for change against a background where the costs of car travel are declining and public transport costs are increasing. We are also investing record amounts in active travel, but we also need to get folk out of their cars. This is about behaviour change, Presiding Officer.
Another brief example, now that I remember, is a video that I uploaded several days ago with Nicola Thinlips talking about the new normal and how we can't go back to the ways of old. Not exactly new rhetoric from herself. I've got compilations somewhere on my channel of her alluding to similar things in the first year of the so-called pandemic. But it was more about the fact that she spent a hell of a lot of time, especially this year, as I've mentioned in videos previous. So I guess in some sense there's an element of vindication on my part. Not that I'm taking any satisfaction from being proven right. But she made a hell of a lot of references to flexible working. We moved away from the phase of people having to stay, home working was heavily promoted during the so-called pandemic, and naturally the reasoning behind that was, everybody was going to spread the big bad coof if they were all working alongside each other in an office environment, for example. I made the point of saying, especially then, and well, more so when they started talking about flexible working, but I still made the point when they were always on about home working as well, that there was an element of this being about travel reduction, really, because it's climate change repackaged. It was about socially conditioning people to become accustomed or accepting to the idea of feeling that they can just work from home. It was normalising the idea. And then we moved towards flexible working, which was the new and improved version of home working. Flexible working was supposed to be a temporary measure which would allow for businesses to ease people back in. The office wouldn't be full. There'd be some people in on several days a week, and then other people would come in on other days, etc. That type of thing was to be implemented, and it was seen as a sort of temporary measure. But as we now know, it's kind of been encouraged to be a permanent thing. And Nicola Thinlips here says quite clearly, clear as day, that, well, I'll let it play for itself.
Out to be, but exactly where the new normal will settle and what the balance will turn out to be. But I think it is reasonable to predict, and indeed perhaps, and I'll come on to this in a second, to encourage a greater degree of home working and hybrid working between people's homes and workplaces, as well as encouraging in office or in workplace working more locally, so hubs in more local communities. I think there are many potential advantages to that. In the most immediate term, as has been the case over the past 2 years, it helps our resilience against spread of infection, is the most immediate advantage, but longer term and more fundamentally.
That's what it's about, yeah. It's totally about that,
I do think it has advantages for work-life balance. It has obvious advantages in terms of reducing our carbon footprint and
there it is.
Reducing commutes to and from work. And
exactly what I was saying for fucking months, Not that it would have taken a genius to conclude what I concluded, but the point is, I was saying this for months because that's what it was obviously about. And she comes out and says it. But again, all this emphasis on behavioural change, all this emphasis on a means to change your lifestyle, change the way you view the world. And make no mistake about it, in time this will get worse and worse and more stringent, and micromanagement will become a more engulfing concept, For now it's seen as sort of optional, and it's all about doing the right thing. We all need to come together and all that shit. But as I said, just picture a world where nobody complies. They're going to have to take drastic action, surely. But naturally, this drastic action will come in some shape or form, regardless. It's just a matter of how it comes about. Will it be due to nobody complying? No, I don't think so. I think it'll just come down to the fact that measures will need to be put in place to ensure that compliance remains, and all the rest of it. They'll have to ensure that we're all living sustainably, you see.
COP27 will also, in a sense, mark an important milestone. As some of you will be aware, this year will see the 30th anniversary of the Rio Earth Summit. It was there, of course, that the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was agreed. And as such, it was a turning point in the world's recognition of global warming. In the decades since, our understanding of climate change, indeed our acceptance of its reality, has come a long way, but we have not yet done nearly enough to tackle it. And our progress towards climate justice, especially on loss and damage, remains painfully, shamefully, unacceptably slow. We must ensure that the coming year will be another turning point. We must build on the movement that came together in Glasgow, and we must continue to make the case, which the IPCC report bolsters, for urgent action. I want to tell you today that Scotland is determined to play our full part in that effort, and we are keen to work with and learn from others who share that same commitment. So I really welcome today's discussion, and I'm delighted that so many people are taking part. Once again, let me thank the World Resources Institute for organising this event, and look forward to working with all of you as we've got hugely powerful voices advancing this. So we need to work together from now in the run-up to COP27 to make sure that we see this whole agenda take a number of step changes forward, and we come out of Egypt in a much better and much different place. I believe it's
agenda being the operative word, of course,
possible, and I'll certainly do everything I can working with all of you to make sure we achieve it.
Oh, God. On the one hand, she's signing off on policy after policy to ensure that we're all socially engineered to perfection. And then on the other hand, she sits there and pretends she's a fucking climatologist, and it really does embarrass me. I'm embarrassed for her. But anyway, on that note, just a wee compilation of the shite I've subjected myself to today. And on that note, peace.